Detectives in Manatee County are trying to figure out what set off a man to kill 3 women last night, including his mother and cousin. They say Javante Bryce also nearly fled the state to kill an ex-girlfriend in Georgia before he died in a shootout with deputies.
I'm sorry. The words hung in the air of room 114 at the Motel 6 in Bradenton, Florida. Tidamisha Scott looked at her son, Javante Bryce, confusion crossing her face. "What did you do?" she asked, unaware these would be her final words. Without hesitation, Bryce raised his gun and fired 3 shots. His mother collapsed to the floor as her boyfriend and 2 young daughters watched in horror, frozen in disbelief. It was June 24th, 2024, a day that would forever change multiple families across Manatee County. The motel room, once a temporary haven, transformed into the first scene of a methodical killing spree that would claim 3 lives within hours. The calculated nature of Bryce's actions, beginning with this cold apology to his mother, revealed a man who had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. His journey had just begun. The violence that erupted across Manatee County that summer day left communities reeling. After executing his mother at the motel, 28-year-old Javante Bryce drove to Palmetto, where his cousin was enjoying a cookout with friends. As she prepared to leave, walking toward her car with no suspicion of danger, Bryce approached and fired multiple shots. Despite emergency responders' efforts, she died an hour later. Without pause, Bryce continued his deadly mission, traveling to another Bradenton residence. There, he located his ex-girlfriend's new partner and fatally shot her. Throughout his rampage, Bryce posted disturbing messages on social media under the name Scudda Bryce, including ominous statements like "See you in hell" directed at his victims. Law enforcement quickly mobilized, but Bryce was already fleeing northward, potentially targeting a 4th victim in Georgia. 3 women dead, multiple families devastated, and a community left questioning how such calculated brutality could unfold in their midst. Welcome to Explosive True Crime Stories, where we examine the darkest moments in criminal history to understand not just what happened, but why, and how you might protect yourself from similar dangers. Today's case goes beyond ordinary family violence, revealing layers of deception that ultimately triggered a deadly rampage. If you've ever wondered what warning signs precede such violence, or how someone could target their own family, stay with me throughout this video. I promise you'll gain insights that could potentially save lives. The story I'm about to share contains twists that even seasoned investigators found shocking. Hit that like button now if you're ready to uncover the truth behind this family tragedy. Beneath the surface of this horrific triple murder lies a secret that few were willing to acknowledge. A forbidden relationship that threatened to expose years of family dysfunction. What was Javante Bryce so desperate to hide that he would eliminate 3 women connected to his life? As we'll discover, text messages recovered from his phone suggest an inappropriate connection that crossed boundaries no family should ever breach. This taboo entanglement, when threatened with exposure, became the match that ignited his murderous rage. By the end of this video, you'll understand how toxic secrets can fester within families until they explode with deadly consequences, and why some relationships are forbidden for profound reasons. Javante Bryce grew up in Manatee County, Florida, a region known for its beautiful beaches and tight-knit communities. Born in the mid-1990s, he was raised primarily by his mother, Tidamisha Scott, alongside at least 2 younger sisters in a household that neighbors described as mostly quiet but occasionally troubled. Former classmates recall Bryce as someone who kept to himself, neither particularly popular nor completely isolated, a young man who existed in the margins of social circles. The family moved frequently throughout Bryce's childhood, never establishing deep roots in any single neighborhood. This transient lifestyle created a fractured support system, with extended family members, including the cousin he would later kill, often stepping in to provide stability during turbulent periods. Financial struggles were a constant companion for the family, with Tidamisha working multiple jobs to support her children. By his early 20s, Bryce had developed a complex relationship with his mother, alternating between periods of dependence and resentment. Those who knew the family noted tension, particularly as Bryce entered adulthood without establishing independence. He lived intermittently with his mother, various girlfriends, and occasionally in motels when relationships deteriorated. This unstable living situation reflected deeper issues within the family dynamic, where boundaries were often blurred and roles frequently shifted. Long before his killing spree, Bryce had established a troubling pattern of criminal behavior. Court records revealed multiple arrests dating back to 2015, including charges for burglary, theft, and drug possession. These early encounters with law enforcement painted a picture of escalating disregard for legal boundaries, but it was his history of domestic violence that truly foreshadowed the horror to come. Police had responded to at least 4 domestic disturbance calls involving Bryce and various partners. In 2021, he was arrested after allegedly choking an ex-girlfriend during an argument about their child. The charges were later reduced when the victim became uncooperative with prosecutors, a common and tragic pattern in domestic abuse cases. Another incident in 2023 resulted in a restraining order that Bryce repeatedly violated, demonstrating his contempt for legal restrictions and his partner's boundaries. Each intervention represented a missed opportunity to address the dangerous behavior brewing beneath the surface. Bryce's romantic relationships followed a disturbing cycle of intensity, control, and eventual violence. He fathered at least one child with a former girlfriend, though his involvement as a parent was inconsistent at best. Friends described how he would initially shower new partners with attention and affection before gradually isolating them from friends and family. His social media accounts revealed a complex web of relationships with multiple women simultaneously, often playing them against each other. Text messages recovered after his death showed he frequently threatened self-harm when partners attempted to leave him, a classic manipulation tactic of abusers. One ex-girlfriend later told investigators that Bryce had once held her captive in her apartment for 3 days when she suggested breaking up. Most concerning was his pattern of maintaining contact with former partners through intimidation and harassment. Even after relationships ended, Bryce refused to let go, creating an expanding circle of women who lived in fear of his unpredictable behavior and explosive anger. In the months before the murders, Bryce exhibited increasingly alarming behavior that, in retrospect, signaled his deteriorating mental state. Co-workers at the warehouse where he worked sporadically noted his growing paranoia and sudden outbursts of anger over minor issues. He began posting cryptic messages on social media about cleansing his life and removing obstacles. His mother had confided to a friend that she was concerned about Javanti's erratic sleep patterns and newfound obsession with firearms.
Detectives in Manatee County are trying to figure out what set off a man to kill 3 women last night, including his mother and cousin. They say Javanti Bryce also nearly fled the state to kill an ex-girlfriend in Georgia before he died in a shootout with deputies. And that's not all. They believe Bryce initially targeted a different ex-girlfriend in Palmetto until his sister talked him down.
As Fox 13's Kimberly Cuizon reports for us tonight, he then went after his other loved ones.
This is where Bryce started. Deputies say he came to a motel room where his mom was staying. He told her he was sorry before he shot her 3 times.
Once he opened that door, it was just sheer pandemonium, chaos.
At this Motel 6 around 9:17 Tuesday night, Christina Valentine's husband rushed to help 48-year-old Titi Maisha Scott.
People yelling, screaming, he shot my mom, somebody call 911.
Deputies say Scott's own son, 28-year-old Javanti Bryce, pulled the trigger.
He was out of here before we even came out of our room. Like, it happened like that.
23 minutes later, deputies were called to this home off 26th Street Court East in Palmetto.
I heard a pop.
Deputies say he killed his cousin, 29-year-old Sequoia Bryce, as she was leaving a family cookout.
That's when I see 2 people out there and they're going, oh my God, they're on the ground.
24 minutes later, deputies say Bryce drove to an apartment complex in Bradenton off 51st Street Circle West, where he killed an ex-girlfriend's new partner, Sharrell Carter.
He seemed to have an agenda. He knew exactly who he wanted to kill, and he did not have a hard time locating them.
Deputies sent out a bolo after learning Bryce was traveling to Georgia, where another ex-girlfriend lived. Hamilton County deputies tried to pull him over, but Bryce came out shooting. Deputies shot back, killing him.
We don't know what set this man off.
Court records show Bryce had struggled with his mental health. 2 risk protection orders were filed against him in 2021 and 2023. In them, it states he tried to commit suicide at least twice. Deputies are trying to piece together what was going through his mind the night of his rampage.
This family is devastated. This is going to be a very difficult thing for them to overcome.
Sheriff Wells believes they could learn more information from a woman who was with Bryce, and deputies believe she was traveling with him at the time of all the shootings, and detectives are now interviewing her. In Manatee County, Kimberly Quizon, Fox 13 News.
Perhaps most telling was an incident 2 weeks before the killings, when Bryce's sister found him sitting alone in his car, staring blankly ahead for hours. When questioned, he simply replied, "Planning the future." No one recognized these behaviors as the countdown to violence. The 48 hours preceding June 24th revealed a man methodically preparing for violence. On Saturday morning, June 22nd, Bryce visited a local pawn shop where he purchased additional ammunition. Security footage showed him calm and focused, a man with purpose. That evening, he withdrew nearly all funds from his bank account and gave his prized collection of sneakers to a neighbor's teenage son, an action that in hindsight appears to be clearing possessions before his planned rampage. Sunday, June 23rd, Bryce spent hours driving around Manatee County, later determined to be reconnaissance of his victims' locations. Cell phone records placed him near each murder site, suggesting he was mapping his route. He also made several calls to family members, including his mother and cousin, arranging to see them the following day. These seemingly normal check-ins were actually Bryce confirming his targets would be where he expected them when his plan activated. Monday morning dawned with no outward indication of the horror to come. At approximately 10:15, Bryce arrived at Palmetto Trace Apartments, where his younger sister was visiting his ex-girlfriend, the mother of his child. Witnesses later described his demeanor as unervingly calm as he entered the apartment without knocking. What happened next sent chills through everyone present. Standing in the living room, Bryce looked directly at his ex-girlfriend and stated flatly, "I have to kill you." The room fell silent as the weight of his words registered. His sister, showing remarkable courage, stepped between them and attempted to defuse the situation. "You don't mean that, Javante. Let's talk about what's really bothering you," she pleaded. For several tense minutes, she managed to engage him in conversation, gradually steering him away from his expressed intention. In a bizarre shift, Bryce suddenly asked if he could take a shower in the apartment. When this strange request was denied, he didn't argue, but simply nodded and left. His sister immediately called their mother, warning her that something was seriously wrong with Javante. Unfortunately, this warning came too late. As Bryce walked to his car, neighbors noticed him muttering to himself and checking his waistband repeatedly, where a concealed handgun waited. His first attempted murder had been temporarily thwarted, but his deadly plan was already shifting to his next target. By 11:30 that morning, Bryce arrived at the Motel 6 on State Road 64 in Bradenton. His mother, Tidamisha Scott, had been staying there temporarily with her boyfriend and 2 youngest daughters, ages 7 and 9. Security cameras captured Bryce parking directly in front of room 114, sitting motionless in his vehicle for nearly 4 minutes before exiting, a final moment of contemplation before crossing an unthinkable threshold. When Tidamisha opened the door, she initially greeted her son with a smile that quickly faded as she registered his expression. According to her boyfriend's later testimony, Bryce entered silently, looked around the cramped room where his young sisters were watching television, then turned to his mother. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Confused, Tidamisha asked, "What did you do?" Without answering, Bryce pulled the handgun from his waistband and fired 3 shots directly into her chest. The young girls screamed as their mother collapsed. Tidamisha's boyfriend froze in shock, later describing how Bryce looked at his mother's body with an expression of cold satisfaction before turning to leave. He didn't acknowledge his sisters or threaten anyone else in the room. His mission accomplished, he walked unhurriedly back to his car, already focused on his next destination. Tidamisha Scott was pronounced dead at the scene when paramedics arrived minutes later, summoned by the boyfriend's frantic call to 911.
All right, I want to get to some breaking news into the 10 Tampa Bay newsroom. Right now, Manatee deputies are investigating a triple homicide.
Deputies tell 10 Tampa Bay 3 women are dead and the man responsible is also dead. This all happening after investigators say he shot at deputies.
10 Tampa Bay reporter Andrea Lyon joining us live from that scene. And Andrea, deputies are telling you this is a multi-scene situation for them right now.
Yeah, good morning, Caitlin and Jameson. I'm actually still about 20 minutes away from that scene. It's a good a chunk of travel away from Tampa, about 45 minutes at least. But let's get to some video right away. Here's what we know right now. Deputies responded to the Motel 6 on 67th Avenue around 9:15 last night. When deputies arrived on the scene, that's when they found a 48-year-old woman dead. And witnesses at the scene told deputies the male suspect, Javante Bryce, came to the motel and shot and killed his mother. Deputies are still working to figure out why, and deputies believe Javante then left. 25 minutes later at 9:40, deputies were called to a deadly shooting on 26th Street Court East. There, deputies found another woman. She was 29, shot inside of an SUV. Deputies attempted life-saving measures there, but she died an hour later around 10:50. And then witnesses identified Javante Bryce as that shooter. Now, Jameson and Caitlin, while investigating those 2 cases, deputies received another call about another shooting in Bradenton. Deputies say the same suspect, Javante Bryce, the man we've been talking about, shot another female. She later died at the hospital as well. And when it comes to Bryce, a BOLO was then issued for his vehicle, and they were able to find him all the way up in Hamilton County. If you don't know where that is, that's near the state line. At 1:30 this morning, Bryce was then shot and killed after he fired at Hamilton County deputies. And officials tell 10 Tampa Bay Bryce was traveling to Georgia with the intent to kill another person. He was stopped, obviously, before that he was able to carry that out. But Caitlin and Jameson, all of this information still coming out, trying to figure out why, but all of it's on our 10 Tampa Bay app as well as online. Live on the way to Bradenton, Andrea Lyon, 10 Tampa Bay.
All right, great.
Before we continue with Bryce's deadly journey across Manatee County, I want you to consider what we've learned so far. How many warning signs did you notice in Bryce's behavior? The explicit threat to his ex-girlfriend, the unusual request to shower, the calm demeanor masking deadly intentions. These are critical indicators that violence was imminent. Would you recognize these danger signals if someone in your life exhibited them? Studies show that most perpetrators of family violence display observable warning signs before acting. If someone you know makes direct threats, gives away prized possessions, or shows sudden calmness after a period of agitation, these could indicate they've made a decision to act violently. Take a moment to like this video and share in the comments any warning signs you've recognized in past situations that made you uncomfortable. Your experience might help someone else identify danger before it's too late. Now, let's return to Bryce's rampage as he headed toward his second victim. After leaving the motel, Bryce drove directly to a residential neighborhood in Palmetto, arriving at approximately 12:45 in the afternoon. His cousin, a 32-year-old woman who had often served as a mediator during family conflicts, was attending a weekend cookout with friends. Unaware of the tragedy that had already unfolded, she was enjoying what should have been an ordinary summer gathering. Witnesses later told investigators that Bryce parked across the street, watching the house for nearly 20 minutes. He made no attempt to hide his presence, even waving casually to a neighbor who recognized him. As his cousin walked to her car, preparing to leave the cookout, Bryce approached her with calculated precision. Security footage from a nearby home captured their brief interaction. A few words exchanged before he raised his weapon. She attempted to run, making it only a few steps before Bryce fired multiple shots. Guests at the cookout rushed outside at the sound of gunfire, finding her lying in the driveway as Bryce calmly returned to his vehicle. Despite immediate first aid efforts by friends and rapid response from emergency services, she succumbed to her injuries approximately 1 hour later at Blake Medical Center. Bryce, meanwhile, was already en route to his third target, checking his phone for an address while posting a cryptic message. Family first, family last, family gone. By 2:30 that afternoon, Bryce had navigated to a modest single-story home in East Bradenton. This residence belonged to 26-year-old Jasmine Reynolds, who had recently begun dating one of Bryce's former girlfriends. According to neighbors, Bryce approached the front door with the same unsettling composure he had displayed at previous locations, knocking politely as though making a social call. When Reynolds answered, surveillance footage from her doorbell camera captured their brief exchange. "Is she here?" Bryce asked, presumably referring to his ex-girlfriend. When Reynolds replied that she was alone, Bryce nodded slightly before drawing his weapon. Unlike his previous victims, who had little time to react, Reynolds attempted to slam the door and retreat inside. Bryce fired through the closing door, striking her multiple times. A neighbor working in his garage heard the shots and rushed over, finding Reynolds critically wounded in her entryway. He immediately called emergency services while attempting to provide aid, but her injuries proved fatal. She was pronounced dead at the scene. In a particularly disturbing detail, investigators later discovered that Bryce had circled the property after the shooting, peering through windows as if searching for someone else, suggesting his ex-girlfriend may have been his intended target, with Reynolds becoming a substitute victim in her absence. Throughout his deadly journey across Manatee County, Bryce maintained an active presence on social media, leaving digital breadcrumbs that would later provide investigators with disturbing insights into his mindset. Using the username ScudderBryce, he posted updates between each murder, creating a real-time documentation of his rampage. After killing his mother, he shared a childhood photo of them together with the caption, "Pig, I love you, but you had to go." Following his cousin's murder, he posted, "Family secrets stay buried now." Most chilling was his final post after killing Jasmine Reynolds. "See you in hell. 3 down, 1 to go." This suggested a fourth target remained in his plans, later determined to be another ex-girlfriend living in Georgia. Bryce also sent private messages to several friends, including one that read, "When the truth comes out, you'll understand why this had to happen." These digital communications revealed not a man in the midst of a psychological break, but someone methodically executing a plan while wanting his motivations acknowledged. A performance for an audience he believed would eventually understand his actions. The methodical execution of Bryce's killing spree reveals extensive premeditation rather than impulsive violence. His careful selection of victims, reconnaissance of locations, and the calculated timing between murders demonstrate strategic planning. Investigators noted that Bryce chose times when each victim would be accessible but relatively isolated from potential intervention. His vehicle contained a bag packed with clothes, nearly $4,000 in cash, and printed directions to an address in Georgia, evidence he intended to continue his journey after completing his local objectives. Most telling was a handwritten list found in his wallet, containing the names of all 3 victims, with times noted beside each, plus a 4th name with a question mark. This wasn't rage. It was a mission, meticulously organized and deliberately carried out. As investigators delved deeper into Bryce's digital footprint, they uncovered disturbing evidence pointing to the true catalyst behind his rampage. Text messages recovered from his phone revealed an inappropriate relationship that had developed between Bryce and his 14-year-old second cousin, a relationship that his mother and older cousin had recently discovered and confronted him about. The messages, dating back approximately 6 months, showed a pattern of grooming behavior as Bryce positioned himself as a mentor and confidant to the vulnerable teenager. What began as seemingly innocent communication gradually evolved into increasingly inappropriate exchanges. When the girl's mother, Bryce's cousin and second victim, discovered these messages just 3 days before the murders, she immediately contacted Tidamisha Scott to address the situation. According to family members interviewed after the tragedy, both women had confronted Bryce in a heated family meeting the evening of June 23rd. They had threatened to report him to authorities if he didn't immediately cease all contact with a minor. Witnesses to this confrontation described Bryce as unusually quiet during the accusations, simply nodding and agreeing to their demands before leaving abruptly. What the women couldn't have known was that Bryce had already begun formulating his deadly response. His journal, found in his apartment after the murders, contained entries suggesting he believed the only way to protect his reputation and avoid potential criminal charges was to eliminate those who knew about the inappropriate relationship. Most disturbing was his apparent belief that he was somehow the victim in the situation, writing, "They're trying to destroy me over nothing. They don't understand what we have. I won't let them take everything from me." The taboo relationship didn't emerge in isolation, but against a backdrop of long-standing family dysfunction. Interviews with extended family members revealed a household where boundaries were routinely blurred and inappropriate behaviors often normalized. Bryce's own childhood had been marked by exposure to domestic violence and substance abuse, creating a distorted understanding of healthy relationships. Several relatives described a family culture of secrecy. Problems were to be handled in-house, rather than involving authorities or outside help. This code of silence had previously concealed incidents of domestic violence, financial improprieties, and even allegations of past sexual misconduct by other family members. When Tidamisha and her niece broke this unwritten rule by threatening to report Bryce's inappropriate relationship with a minor, they shattered the protective bubble of family secrecy he had counted on. Financial tensions also played a role in the family's complex dynamics. Bryce had borrowed substantial sums from both his mother and cousin, money he had no means to repay. Financial records showed his mother had recently removed him as a beneficiary from her life insurance policy after discovering he had attempted to take out a loan using her identity. These financial betrayals, combined with the exposure of his inappropriate relationship with a minor, created a perfect storm of motives. Bryce likely saw the elimination of his accusers as solving both his immediate legal jeopardy and his financial obligations in one horrific act. If you're finding this analysis valuable, take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to Explosive True Crime Stories. Your support helps us continue exploring these complex cases and the psychological factors behind them. Now I want you to consider, how often do family dynamics enable dangerous behavior? What happens when the desire to protect family reputation outweighs protecting vulnerable members? The Bryce case demonstrates how a culture of secrecy can create the perfect environment for predatory behavior to flourish. Have you ever witnessed a family choosing to handle serious issues privately rather than involving appropriate authorities? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What warning signs should families watch for that might indicate inappropriate relationships developing? Your insights could help others recognize dangerous situations before they escalate to violence. As we continue examining this case, consider how different interventions might have changed the outcome for everyone involved. Could earlier action have prevented these 3 murders? By 3:15 that afternoon, Manatee County Sheriff Rick Wells had activated a multi-agency response to the triple homicide. Recognizing the methodical nature of the killings, authorities feared Bryce would continue his rampage. A statewide "Be on the lookout" alert was issued, with Bryce's vehicle description and license plate number distributed to law enforcement agencies across Florida and neighboring states. The sheriff's office established a command center where detectives analyzed Bryce's social media posts and phone records in real time. This digital investigation quickly revealed his apparent intention to travel to Georgia, likely targeting another ex-girlfriend. Deputies were dispatched to secure the homes of Bryce's known associates, while tactical teams conducted simultaneous searches of his apartment and frequent hangouts. The coordination extended beyond traditional law enforcement, with Florida Highway Patrol positioning troopers at strategic points along northbound highways. Cell phone companies expedited tracking requests, allowing authorities to pinpoint Bryce's movement as he traveled north on Interstate 75. Apparently unaware that dozens of officers were converging on his location from multiple directions. As darkness fell across Florida, Bryce continued his northward journey, maintaining a speed just below the limit, a calculated effort to avoid attracting attention. Surveillance cameras at a gas station near Gainesville captured him at approximately 9:45 that evening, calmly refueling his vehicle and purchasing snacks. A woman, later identified as a recent acquaintance unaware of his crimes, accompanied him inside the store. Law enforcement, tracking his progress through cell phone signals and highway cameras, made the critical decision not to attempt an arrest in populated areas. We were dealing with someone who had already demonstrated his willingness to kill without hesitation, Sheriff Wells later explained. Our priority was ensuring no additional civilians were put at risk. By 11:30 that night, Bryce had entered Hamilton County, less than 20 miles from the Georgia state line. Deputies positioned themselves at a strategic location along the rural highway, coordinating with Georgia authorities who were preparing to intercept him if he crossed the state border. The trap was set as Bryce's vehicle approached, headlights cutting through the Florida night, carrying a killer toward his final confrontation. At approximately 1:30 in the morning on June 25th, Hamilton County deputies activated their emergency lights, signaling for Bryce to pull over on a desolate stretch of highway. Dashcam footage shows his vehicle initially slowing and moving to the shoulder before coming to a complete stop. For 17 seconds, nothing happened, a moment of terrible anticipation. Then, without warning, Bryce emerged from the driver's side, immediately opening fire on the deputies. He exited shooting, recalled Deputy James Hernandez, who sustained a graze wound to his shoulder. There was no hesitation, no commands, just immediate gunfire. For deputies returned fire, striking Bryce multiple times. Medical assistance was immediately called, but Bryce was pronounced dead at the scene. The female passenger, who had remained in the vehicle during the exchange, was unharmed physically but hysterical with shock. She later told investigators that Bryce had said nothing about his crimes during their journey, only that he was heading to Georgia to start fresh. His deadly rampage ended not with the confrontation of his demons, but in a hail of bullets on a dark Florida highway. In the days following the triple homicide, Manatee County residents gathered for candlelight vigils honoring the 3 women whose lives were cut short. The community's collective grief manifested in memorial funds established for Tidamisha Scott's young daughters, who now faced life without their mother. Local counseling services offered free trauma support for those affected, including neighbors who witnessed the violence and first responders who attended the scenes. For the surviving family members, the aftermath brought complicated emotions, grief intertwined with anger, confusion, and guilt. There's no handbook for how to process this kind of family tragedy, explained Dr. Marissa Cohen, a trauma specialist working with the victims' relatives. The youngest victims, Bryce's sisters who witnessed their mother's murder, required specialized therapy to address their profound trauma. School officials worked closely with mental health professionals to create support systems for the children affected across multiple families. The ripple effects extended beyond immediate relatives, touching dozens of lives connected to both victims and perpetrator, demonstrating how family violence creates wounds that extend far beyond the immediate crime scene. The Bryce case highlights critical warning signs that might indicate someone is contemplating violence. First, sudden calmness after a period of agitation, what experts call the calm before the storm, often signals that a person has made a decision to act violently, bringing them a sense of peace. Bryce's methodical behavior in the days before the murders exemplifies this dangerous shift. Second, giving away prized possessions, as Bryce did with his sneaker collection, frequently indicates someone who doesn't expect to need these items in the future. Third, making explicit threats should always be taken seriously, even if the person has made empty threats before. Bryce's statement to his ex-girlfriend, "I have to kill you," was a direct expression of his intentions. Other warning signs include unusual interest in other schedules and locations, rehearsing access to potential victims, and creating legacy tokens, like final messages or videos. Perhaps most importantly, when someone with a history of controlling behavior feels they're losing control, particularly when family secrets are threatened with exposure, the risk of violence increases dramatically. Recognizing these indicators could mean the difference between intervention and tragedy. If you recognize warning signs in someone's behavior, immediate action is crucial. First, create distance. Physical separation is the most effective immediate safety measure. If you can't leave, move to a public area where others are present. Second, document everything, threats, concerning behavior, and previous incidents, as this information is vital for obtaining protective orders. When dealing with someone exhibiting warning signs, avoid confrontations about sensitive topics when alone. Instead, Have difficult conversations in public places or with support present. For family members concerned about inappropriate relationships or behavior, contact professional resources rather than handling it internally. Organizations like the National Domestic Violence Hotline can provide guidance on safely addressing these situations. Create a safety plan that includes emergency contacts, safe locations, and essential documents. Share this plan with trusted individuals who can check on you regularly. Remember that most family violence escalates gradually. What begins as controlling behavior can progress to physical harm. Trust your instincts. If someone's behavior makes you uncomfortable, your subconscious may be recognizing danger signals before you consciously identify them. If this analysis helped you understand the warning signs of family violence, please like this video and subscribe for more insights that could save lives. Share with someone who might benefit from these lessons. Comment below with your thoughts. Has this changed how you view family dynamics and potential danger signs? Your engagement helps spread this crucial information.